All right, so Runway AI, they just dropped Gen-4 and, well, the immediate buzz.
Yeah.
It's all focused on consistency.
Consistency.
Getting those consistent characters and scenes in AI video. And I mean, if this really delivers, it really kind of changes everything for AI filmmaking, doesn't it?
You know, it's fascinating how much emphasis has been placed on consistency as this sort of like holy grail of AI video generation. I mean, we've seen, right, those early models, those gave us like these really tantalizing glimpses of what AI could do, especially with these kind of like short, surreal, almost like dreamlike video clips. But the challenge always was, how do you maintain that visual coherence, keep everything looking right and stable over a longer sequence, especially when you need characters and environments that stay consistent, you know, throughout a video.
Yeah, and anyone who's been following, you know, the whole evolution of AI video, Runway's really kind of been right there at the front. Mm-hmm. So this deep dive, we're going to focus completely on their brand new Gen-4 model. Our aim here is pretty straightforward. We want to break down what Gen-4 is, what it can do, and why there's so much excitement surrounding this release for really anyone involved in video creation.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter if you're thinking, you know, big budget films or you just want to make your YouTube videos better, more interesting.
Absolutely. And, you know, if we take a step back for a second and just think about this from the perspective of someone who's trying to tell a story visually, imagine trying to build a narrative when your main character suddenly changes their appearance completely from one shot to the next.
Right.
Or the background you so carefully crafted for a scene suddenly warps and shifts in a way that just doesn't make sense. That's what we were dealing with in these earlier AI models, you know, that were innovative, absolutely groundbreaking, but they just couldn't quite nail that consistency, that visual coherence. So that made it really hard to use them for serious visual storytelling.
Yeah, and that's what's got people excited about Gen-4. Early reports are suggesting a real shift, like a fundamental change. We're hearing about characters that actually stay the same. They keep the same face, the same look, from the beginning of a video to the end. And then you've got the improvements in motion tracking, backgrounds that actually stay put, and get this, they're even saying the AI now can kind of understand and simulate real-world physics.
That's huge.
And that's what makes this so interesting. This isn't just, you know, a small update. This sounds like a fundamental improvement in how reliable AI can be for creators, like people who really need their visuals to stay consistent, right?
Exactly. And one of the really key things to look at here is how Gen-4 has actually achieved this leap in consistency. Everything we've seen, you know, points to some pretty major advancements in the core technology behind the model itself.
Right, so let's get into this consistency breakthrough. Like we were saying, those earlier models, you know, they were a little unpredictable, to say the least, when it came to keeping things visually consistent. You might start with a character that kind of looks like your neighbor, and then in the next shot, suddenly they morph into something completely different, something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's true.
Not ideal for, you know, making a movie.
Yeah, and what's really striking about Gen-4 is how it seems to have tackled this head on. It can now generate characters that stay consistent throughout an entire video. I mean, think about it. That means you could actually have an AI-generated actor, right, who looks and feels like the same person from scene to scene.
Yeah, and it's not just like a vague resemblance either. The information we have is talking about stable facial identities. So that means even those fine details of a character's face, like their expressions, their specific features, those are reportedly kept consistent. That level of detail, that granularity, just wasn't there before.
That's right. And these advancements go beyond just the characters themselves. The motion tracking is better, so the movements within a scene feel a lot more fluid, more believable. And the background coherence, that's key too, because for us to really feel like we're in a scene, that environment needs to feel solid, real, right? Not just like it's constantly shifting and changing in an unnatural way.
Yeah, and we've heard that the AI can now simulate real-world physics. That was a big part of that demo they put out, the one with the cloak blowing in the sandstorm. Remember that one?
Yeah.
The way the fabric moved, how it reacted to the wind. It felt really natural, surprisingly so.
Yeah.
Those little details, they just add a whole new level of realism to the video.
It's not just visually consistent anymore. It's moving in a way that feels consistent and believable. And that's really key to engaging an audience.
Yeah.
Because when those visuals adhere to those laws of physics that we're all familiar with, even if it's a fantastical setting, you know, it helps you suspend your disbelief to really immerse yourself in the world that's being created.
Okay, so consistent visuals, that's obviously a big step forward.
Yeah.
But then Runway also launched this new references tool. And this sounds like a pretty powerful tool for creators to kind of fine-tune their videos. What can you tell us about that?
So the references feature, it's a really interesting development. It seems to give users much more precise control over the creative process. Essentially, what you can do is you provide Gen-4 with a single reference image, sort of like a visual anchor, right? Like if you have a specific character in mind, a particular art style you want to emulate, or even just a specific object that needs to appear in your video.
Okay, so like if I had, let's say, a sketch of a character, I could upload that to Gen-4, and it would then generate a video with a character that actually looks like my sketch.
That's the idea. And it goes beyond just the initial generation, too. You can use the references tool to regenerate elements of a scene from different angles with different lighting in motion, but it'll keep those elements visually consistent. So if you need to show your character from a different perspective or under different lighting conditions, Gen-4 should be able to do that while still making sure that character looks exactly like your original reference.
That's really impressive when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's like being able to pre-visualize your scene, the specific look and feel, and then having the AI generate those different shots while keeping everything consistent, matching your original vision. It just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. And it shifts the whole paradigm from, just typing in a prompt and hoping for the best to actually guiding the AI with concrete visuals. You're saying, this is what I want it to look like, go make it happen. And that just opens up a whole new level of creative accuracy that we didn't really have before.
Now, people always love to see the demos, right? We've seen some of those examples that have been floating around. Let's talk about some of those real-world demonstrations of Gen-4's capabilities. That desert scene they showed, the one with the sandstorm and the figure in the cloak, that was visually really impressive.
Oh, yeah. The way they simulated the sand blowing across the scene, how it interacted with the character's cloak, it really highlighted how much the physics engine has improved. And, like you said, the character itself, it stayed the same throughout the whole shot, even with all that shifting light and shadow.
And then there was that other scene, almost like a dream sequence, with the girl walking through the woods, and then suddenly a Chevy Camaro appears.
Right.
I thought it was interesting that it was such a recognizable car because AI has traditionally had a really hard time rendering things like cars accurately. They get all the details wrong.
Yeah, and that's a really important point because being able to generate a car that's clearly recognizable with the right details, that suggests that the AI has a much better understanding of real-world objects and how they should look.
Oh, yeah. And then there was that, I think it was like a vulture-like creature, the way its wings moved, the details of its feathers, that was so much more detailed and fluid than a lot of the other AI-generated animals we've seen in the past, which often look kind of jerky and undefined.
That's true. That example really showed Gen-4's potential for handling complex organic movements. The way it animated those wings was really impressive, very fluid, very believable.
And then on a slightly more abstract note, we saw some examples with the jellyfish movement, the way the particles came together to form the shape of a woman. That shows a different kind of capability, the ability to generate interesting visuals, even without a direct real-world reference.
Absolutely, and those examples really highlight the versatility of Gen-4. It can not only replicate aspects of the real world, but it can also bring these imagined, these almost surreal concepts to life in a way that we haven't really seen before.
But the official demos are one thing. We also need to look at, real-world user experiences. We took a look at Matt VidPro AI's channel. He got his hands on Gen-4 pretty early on and started doing some testing. What were some of his key takeaways, like from an actual user's perspective?
Yeah, so Matt VidPro AI, he had some really interesting observations, from a practical standpoint. He said the generation times are generally pretty fast, which is great news for creators who need to get stuff done quickly. He also talked about how easy it was to upload custom images as references, which is, in line with how that references tool is supposed to work.
But his tests weren't all perfect. Right? He had some hiccups along the way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, his testing showed that Gen-4 is a big improvement, but there's still room for improvement. He had one case where he had a character that was supposed to be missing an arm, and in one of the shots, the arm just reappeared out of nowhere, suggesting that while it's much better at consistency, there are still some challenges when it comes to maintaining those really specific, really unusual details.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even though it's gotten a lot better at consistency, it might not be perfectly consistent down to every last detail yet. How about that car chase sequence he tried to generate? What happened with that one?
Well, in that car chase example, the AI was able to create that fire trail behind the car, which is cool, it got that detail right. But he said that some of the specific camera movements he wanted, especially within the short generation time frame, those weren't executed exactly as he had envisioned.
Right.
So that seems to suggest that really complex camera work, especially within those shorter clips, might still be a bit of a limitation.
And what about that example with the truck trying to break through a wall? Remember that one? It seemed like the results were kind of inconsistent, right?
Yeah, that's right. The first time he tried it, the truck didn't actually smash through the wall like it was supposed to. It just kind of like magically appeared on the other side in the next frame. But then when he tried it again later, the truck actually did interact with the wall, so that seems to indicate that how the AI interprets and executes certain actions, that can still vary a bit.
Yeah, but that example with the lemons raining down, that one seemed to show that it has at least a decent grasp of physics, even if the visuals weren't, completely photorealistic.
Yeah, that was a fun one. It definitely demonstrated that it can simulate basic physics fairly well. The lemons fell, they piled up. It looked pretty natural, even if the lemons themselves weren't, hyper-realistic. The overall effect was quite convincing.
And then he did recreate that really creepy, VHS-style lemon footage, which I guess shows that it can handle those stylistic requests pretty well.
Exactly. So it can not only try to replicate reality, it can also try to emulate certain visual styles, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and he also did some experiments with 3D animation, right? With the robot on the rocket.
Yeah, that robot animation was actually quite impressive, especially how consistently it rendered the robot itself, and the animation was surprisingly expressive, for a robot.
Right. And then there were some of those more subtle animation tests, like the one where he just asked for a whoosh effect. I guess that shows that the AI can handle different levels of complexity in terms of the motion it's trying to generate. What about that slow motion fox footage? That one looked pretty good, didn't it?
Yeah, that was interesting. The first time he generated the slow motion fox, it was really realistic, impressively so. But then when he tried to generate it again, there were some inconsistencies, like the fox seemed to almost float or fly, so it's not always perfectly consistent in terms of the realism, even when it's using the same prompt.
Yeah. And then lastly, there was that test where he tried to do a really deep macro zoom into a film reel. That one seemed to be a bit of a struggle for the AI, right?
Yeah, that one had mixed results. One of the times he tried it, it actually did a pretty good job of shifting focus as it zoomed in, but other times it just didn't quite seem to get the concept of a deep, almost microscopic zoom.
Yeah. Okay, so Gen-4 might not be a perfect, foolproof solution, but it's definitely a big step up in terms of consistency and overall capability. So thinking of all the different creative people out there, who do you think is going to be the most excited about this kind of technology?
Well, the impact of Gen-4, I think it's going to be felt across a lot of different creative fields. Filmmakers, obviously, this gives them powerful new tools for things like pre-visualization, for generating concept sequences, even potentially incorporating AI-generated elements into their final productions.
And it's not just like Hollywood studios, right? What about indie creators, smaller teams?
Oh, absolutely. Marketers, they can use this to create better, more engaging video content a lot faster. Music video directors can explore whole new visual styles and narrative approaches. And for people who are just creating content on YouTube or independently, Gen-4 could make video production a lot more accessible, allowing them to do more ambitious stuff without needing massive budgets and big film crews.
Yeah, and we even saw that Runway has partnered with Lionsgate. That's a pretty big deal. It suggests that even the big established media companies are taking this technology seriously.
It really does, That partnership with Lionsgate is a really clear signal that AI could become a standard part of how these big media companies make movies and TV shows, especially in areas like storyboarding, pre-visualizing special effects, and maybe even saving them a lot of money in the pre-production and post-production stages.
So we've talked about a lot of the really cool things that Gen-4 can do, but it's important to remember that it's not perfect, right? There are still some limitations to keep in mind.
Absolutely. I mean, as we saw from MapVid Pro AI's testing, getting that perfect consistency, especially when you have very specific or unusual details, that can still be a challenge. The AI doesn't always interpret the prompts exactly the way you might expect, and there's still some level of randomness involved in the output.
And there's still a limit on how long the videos can be, right?
Yeah, the current limit for a single Gen-4 generation is about 10 seconds. And that's something that MapVid Pro AI specifically mentioned. He hopes they'll increase that limit in future versions.
But the speed at which this technology is developing is pretty amazing. Gen-4 came out less than a year after Gen-3. It's just incredible how fast things are moving.
It really is. I think it's safe to say we can expect even faster improvements in AI video generation in the near future. The pace of development is just accelerating.
We even saw that one creator who made an entire mini movie using Gen-4 in about 20 minutes. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, that was Eleanor. Her experiment was really interesting because it shows just how much faster Gen 4 is compared to the older versions. The fact that she could create a whole short film in such a short amount of time, that really says something.
It also makes you wonder if different AI video generation models might start to specialize in different things. It seems like Runway is really focused on realism and cinematic quality.
That makes sense. I mean, given all the different types of video content out there, it seems likely that we'll see different AI models emerge that are really good at specific things. So Runway might become the go-to for realistic cinematic visuals, while other models might be better for things like 2D animation or more abstract, stylized visuals.
Okay, so to sum it all up, Gen 4 from Runway AI, it looks like a big step forward in AI video generation. The key takeaway is that it's finally starting to solve that consistency problem that's been plaguing these models for so long.
Yeah.
Tools like the references feature, those give creators a lot more control over the process, and it seems pretty clear that this technology is going to have a big impact on filmmakers, marketers, and really anyone who creates videos.
What's really exciting is just how quickly this technology is evolving. Gen 4 really tackles one of the biggest limitations of the previous models, and that just opens up a ton of new possibilities.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. With the ability to generate these consistent, realistic videos, what kind of stories, what kind of visual experiences can we create now that just weren't possible before? And how will our whole understanding of visual storytelling change as these tools become more and more powerful and easier to use? It's something to think about as we continue to explore this intersection of technology and creativity.
It definitely is.
All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
What are your thoughts on today's topic? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed.